Guys and gals and pals, the Black Box is officially debuted on YouTube, and you here are joining us right now. I see 170 already watching live on YouTube. Thank you very much. This is our Wednesday night extravaganza. We have a very special guest to kick things off right now, so I want to bring him in, and I want to remind you guys that experience is food for the brain. Some people have a dream, and that dream's central image is a metaphor for a good part of life. That is not knowing where you're going or what you're doing. My fondest memories are rooted in the present, where things are done out of some inexplicable inner imperative rather than because of the work that's demanded. It's surprising how hard we'll work when the work is done just for ourselves. If I've learned one thing from being a screenwriter and teacher, it's the importance of playing to creativity and happiness. My job is essentially to come up with 365 ideas a year. If you ever want to find out just how uninteresting you really are, get a job where the quality and frequency of your thoughts determine your livelihood. But I found that the only way I can keep writing every day, year after year, is to let my mind wander into new territories. And to do that, I've had to cultivate a kind of mental playfulness. So with that, let's play. Guys and gals and pals, I speak of the word greatness and revel in its glory. Are we exposed to such greatness through hearsay, fable, or an amazing story? Nope. I've seen greatness in the form of a man that has already broken every record there is to break. This rap can't convey how this man's heart can wrap itself around our souls like a philosophical octopus that isn't here to squeeze, but rather play. His generosity can offer you a bespoke solution that aligns with your creative needs. The confluence of great minds' expertise will lead to a comprehensive solution. Take this man, as his artistry is never quite done. His will can never be outdone, and he sure is a hell of a lot of fun. There is no pragmatic approach when it comes to our great craft. We make discoveries, not mistakes, like a GM digging deep in any NBA draft. Together, we'll pick up our paintbrush with comprising quality. We can grasp the main point, even with some brevity. We won't be short, guys and gals, nor will we shortchange you when it comes to anything, especially Timmy. I'm speaking of this incredible artist's latest book. I can hear you all shouting, gimme, gimme, gimme. Don't worry, we won't keep you in the dark. So welcome a kind and talented friend and artist to kick off our first live on Wednesdays. Last name Metcalf, first name Mark. Welcome to the Black Box, my friend.
Thank you. I can't, now I'm in the picture, I guess. Yeah, I wasn't in the picture.
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you, Avi. It's always good to see you and always good to hear you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will echo those sentiments and throw them right back at you. I love our conversations off screen and on screen. There's always magic to be made when you're sitting with someone as honest as Mark. I think that's Mark. If I had to pin it, we have to condense as writers. Condense. Honest. Honest is the first word that I would think of when describing you.
Thank you. I take that as supreme flattery, or not flattery. Honesty on your part. No, that's what I'm always going for. Honesty, forthrightness, and as close as I can get to whatever the truth might be.
Oh, I love that. That is a journey that's probably eternal for us, and gosh, that's why we do what we do. But we might have to be a bit, I don't know, as a storyteller, you're an amazing storyteller that has taught this craft, that has ventured forth, leading with passion. We have to be self-masochists to commit ourselves to this craft, shouldn't we? I mean, aren't we?
Yes, I think when we put ourselves into the marketplace, and when we say I'm going to make a living doing this, then that's pretty masochistic, because then you put yourself up to be put down. I mean, to be ignored, to be adored one day and ignored the next day. If you just do it for yourself and just enjoy what comes, if it comes or if it doesn't come, that's not so masochistic. That's the only. I mean, young actors sometimes ask me, should I go into the theater? And I say, if you have to ask, don't do it. Because it's a calling. It has to be, there's no choice really. You just are, that's what you have to do.
Sure.
And some people have to create either a character as an actor, or as I've done with this book about my brother, you have to create a story that people can read.
I want to delve into that because, Mark, you were taking a memoir workshop, and the prompt one week was an encounter, and you wrote about your brother Roy. after helping you get through 2 weeks of winter just after a hip replacement. So for you, correct me if I'm wrong, the moment became emotional, unusually emotional for your family. And when you read the piece in class, you could not stop crying, and the people in the class were all very moved. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I wrote about my brother Roy and about saying goodbye to him at the airport after he'd taken care of me helped me get around for 2 weeks after a hip replacement. And I lived up in the mountains outside of Missoula, Montana. It was, and not because of that, but just because he is the kind of man that he is, and was the kind of man at that time that he is. I found myself as he got out of the car, and it's not in our nature to be affectionate in any way. The tribe we come from is a tribe of librarians and engineers and rather cool and men of that era, the 50s, 60s, aren't encouraged to express emotion or affection. But I found myself saying, "I love you," and he just nodded and went on his way. But I knew he heard me, and I knew he accepted it, and I knew he loved me too. And
did you come to the realization at that moment that your family meant more to you even than you ever thought prior?
Yeah, yes, certainly more. I left home at 18 and went to college and didn't go home for 6 years, except for a funeral once, and I didn't even go to the funeral. But yeah, I went home because I was passing through that town. So my family they weren't bad to me. They just didn't give me something that I needed. When I went to college as an engineer and then discovered the theater in my sophomore year and discovered this kind of passion and creativity, and people could cry one minute and laugh the next minute, this kind of brave new world, as Miranda says at the end of The Tempest, I didn't need to go home because I was getting everything I wanted in the theater, everything I needed. But that family was always there.
Yes.
Even when I was ignoring them. And that moment with my brother, and when I wrote about it and then read it in class, and I was so moved that I was actually overwhelmed. And everybody in the class was very appreciative, not just of the fact that I was weeping, so they said, but also of the language that I had, the writing that I'd done. They were appreciative of that. And I did realize, you're right, at that moment, and not in that moment, that my family meant more to me and was more valuable to me. Oh, there, good. I was going to hold it up. There it is. There's the real thing.
Timmy. And guys, we're going to talk to you about Timmy. I'm going to actually get this off screen for a moment and bring it right back because I want Mark to be able to mention this to you as well. I'm going to bring it up. But guys and gals, Mark Metcalf and I are now going to be having our own virtual show here once every few weeks, discussing Timmy and the craft of storytelling as only Mark and I can. And that's a welcome addition. I know that a lot of you were able to connect with Mark recently with Michael Cooper and Glacier Ray Lloyd in the TKN Celebrity Tournament round number 2. For bragging's sake, Mark was the top vote getter. He's in round 3 right now, round 3. That's some pretty good stuff there. But getting back to this amazing story, which I think the question I have, because I was obviously I read the book, and the writer in me, I couldn't stop writing all these different questions that I wanted to be able to bring up here in this time we have together. You know, you left home to go to college, and you didn't come back for about 6 years. And when you did come home, it was probably more out of a sense of an obligation than it was real affection.
Yeah.
And when you realized how much you love your family and how powerful it was, and you began to write all about them in the workshop, did that open something up creatively as well? Creatively as an artist, as a writer, as a storyteller, we have tools that we put in our toolboxes as storytellers. Right. Were you able to collect some new tools in this process?
Yes, I was able to collect a part of myself that I had only glanced over. I mean, I'd used my family, the character Niedermeyer that I played in Animal House. There's a good deal of my father, of my sense of my father in that, the rigidity and the conservative, archly conservative nature. And I was able to, I tried to create Niedermeyer using my father, but with love rather than with hatred or or vicious satire. I do think Niedermeyer's a comic character,
Sure.
but I also think he's a real human being. So I'd used my family, but realizing this in the class and writing about it and beginning to write this book, I realized that there was a lot more to that my family had given me and that they had not given me, losses that I'd felt through my family. I didn't start writing this until after my mother was dead, my father was dead, my brother was
Sure.
dead. And so I had suffered all those losses. But again, as a man of the 50s and 60s and 70s in the United States, I moved on through that. I didn't
Sure.
allow myself to sort of be brought to my knees by grief. And perhaps I might have been better served if I had. In many ways, the writing of this book allowed me to mourn and to grieve those people, those lost people. Yeah, on the screen now you see my father, on
Sure.
screen right, my mother, my grandmother.
And Mark, the resemblance is uncanny with your father. I mean, it's uncanny.
Yeah, it's very close. I think my little brother, Tim,
Right.
who's right in the middle, the short
Sure.
one, I think he resembled, as he grew older, even more my father. And the way his mind worked was even more my father. I was really kind of, from my father's point of view, I was the strange one. And I think I actually think I look more like my mother. But maybe that's just because I'd rather look more like my mother, because my dad is still kind of out there and not quite touchable.
Right. Almost in that time. So I guess the approach would be different, right? For a child growing up and feeling as if, their father's affection is something they're yearning for. But a lot of times it's simple as something as simple as acceptance, right? We yearn for their acceptance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it makes you so brave to be able to, but you traversed so far, Mark, and you went full throttle again in a career that ended up being defined, of course, as the viewers see it. There's the glitz and glamour and pomps and circumstance of it all, but the commitment behind your pursuit, your life's pursuit as a storyteller, is not something that was very endearing to many people in your time, or at least a generation before your time. Did they really understand how passionate you were, or try to understand your craft?
My family?
Yes.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. As I've said this a couple of times. The only time my father ever expressed pride in what I did was when someone told him that the Twisted Sister video based on I Want to Rock, or that starts I Want to Rock, We're Not Going to Take It,
Sure,
that was played in its entirety on the floor of the Senate when Tipper Gore did her hearings on sex and violence and rock and roll, and Dee Snider testified, and Frank Zappa testified. A friend of my father's told him that this had happened, and my father, who I don't believe had ever seen the video, I'm pretty sure he never saw the video, he expressed great pride to the neighbor of that my work was on the Senate, on the floor, in the Senate records. But I don't think he ever saw it. I'm not sure he would have taken pride in the work. He did when I played a CAG in the television series JAG. I played a colonel on an aircraft carrier, Navy, I think a colonel. And some of the stuff there's so many parts in there that they don't all come back to me.
Sure.
And he did call me at that point and say, because that I was doing that when my brother committed suicide.
Yes.
And he called me after a couple of months when he saw it, when it aired, and he said he really liked that character. He didn't say I really like the work you did. He just said I really like that character, as though I was that character.
Sure.
And the character, resembled me, as all characters resemble me, because that's what I have to work with, is the me of me. But so, yes, he never really accepted the fact that I was an actor and that acting was what I did and loved and wanted to do.
Right.
But he didn't deride it. He didn't diminish me because of it, other than by that time I'd grown beyond the need for his approval or the
Right.
fear of his approbation, and felt like I was my own person and doing what I did. And I didn't do it to anything to harm him. And I don't think he ever did anything to harm me. I know he never did anything to intentionally harm me.
Sure.
He didn't approve or believe in when I was considered to be 4F, morally, physically, and psychologically unfit for military service. And near the end of the Vietnam War, before the lottery, I had to go through the draft.
Sure.
He told me he was very disappointed in me, and then he never mentioned it again. And he didn't.
It's so funny how
what?
It's so funny how our life pursuits can create a disconnect sometimes with people.
Yeah, if you follow what some people call your dream, or you follow the pursuit, and if you enter into it and let it become you and you become it, it'll take you away from a lot of things.
Without question. I tell people, I write and I storytell because I'm broken. We're all broken. Some of us don't admit it, but in a lot of pieces, and storytelling gives me sort of a chance to reconfigure those pieces into 1,000 different things that are positive for people to watch. So sometimes when you endure trauma and you turn into something creative, to see what the process is like when an artist gets hurt, we don't lash out as artists. We turn whatever it is that we're feeling into a bouquet of flowers, and that's beautiful.
It works. Yeah,
and it works so beautifully. And I think when you speak of your brother, gosh, this is something really interesting in the book. And guys, again, Timmy, you have to check this book out. Easiest place is Amazon. But we're going to continuously talk about Timmy as part of Mark's addition to the Black Box here on Wednesdays. Every few weeks, we're going to talk about not only his book, but storytelling. When Tim spent the last 7 years of his life living in North Carolina at your parents' home, he had, unfortunately, an episode in New York. And he was living just a few blocks from where you lived. And that episode put him in Bellevue, in mental ward. And he spent 60 days until your parents were able to sign him out in their care. He was depressed. He wanted to die. But to be done with the demons that haunted him since he was a child, that was sort of the reasoning as to why he didn't want to be here anymore, right, Mark?
No, he didn't. I mean, his suicide note on the day 7 years later, when he shot himself in the back of the head, said, "I should have done this with my pocket knife 7 years ago. Perhaps Mom would still be alive." Part of the way I write the book, he did spend those 7 years in their home. They were not prepared for the kind of mental anguish that he was going through to be able to assuage that anguish or to understand it. And there was their youngest son, the boy that was probably, as I said earlier, most like my father. My father thought that he would just get over this. It was a phase, and he would get over it, and one morning wake up and he would be fine. My mother, I don't think, ever believed that, but I don't think she had the tools, the intellectual tools, the language, it wasn't in her ken. It wasn't in her ecosystem. Mental illness was not part of that ecosystem, and it wore her out. And when she died, when she was diagnosed with, I say this in the book, I think when she was finally diagnosed with full-blown leukemia, she said, "Oh, thank God," as though this was her way out. And she went home, got in bed, called hospice, and was dead 14 days later. A month after that, my brother killed himself, finally succeeded after the attempt in New York and then one futile attempt while he was living with them in North Carolina. I'm telling you the whole story of the book, but by the book, it's better when I wrote it than when I tell it.
Well, you know what? I have to say this. There's something I won't reveal, but someone very near and dear to Mark was the one who started calling Timmy around that time. I won't mention who it is. It's in the book. But you have to pick it up. It's a wonderful read. I can't wait to collaborate with you on a lot behind the scenes as well. We do have a phone call coming up probably Friday or so. We'll talk about that with the person you and I were speaking of behind the scenes regarding the book. Yeah. That's going to be fun. I do want to bring in some of the cast members that we have here. We call them the Green Room cast, Mark. They're all storytellers, and they're wonderful human beings. And if anyone has a question they'd like to ask Mark, feel free. The one thing I want to bring in Kelly White first for a reason as well. Kelly, if you can, I want to talk about Montana for a little bit because Kelly knows a bit about Montana.
Oh,
Mark
good.
knows a bit about Montana. Kelly, my question to you first as I bring you up on screen is, how long did you live in Montana when you were there?
Well, from the day I was born until right around a little after my 9th birthday. So
Ninth birthday.
What part of Montana?
I was born down in Hamilton.
Sure.
And
On the
eventually
Bitterroot.
moved up to Libby. Have you been to Hamilton?
Yeah, I lived in Missoula for 5 years, and so I was up towards Hamilton, and I'd go up to Darby to fish, which is just up the river, up the Bitterroot River, and yeah, it's beautiful up there. And it's I don't know if you've been back lately, but since Yellowstone got into that valley, it's pushed the values of homes up. You know, people who raise their kids there can't afford to live there anymore.
That's what I've heard. My sister went back about 4 years ago, and kind of did a video tour for us that didn't get to go, and showed me a lot of stuff. I guess Darby's like just a huge dude ranch, and
just Darby used to be a great just a little fishing town, and you could and it's still a good place to get breakfast.
Probably. I mean, my grandparents and my mom, before I was born, they lived over around there. They were like ranch hands and cooks on one of the bigger, when it was just a real ranch, it wasn't for tourists. Missoula, though, did they have the pulp mill going when you were there? Because you could usually smell that where you got there.
That was gone by the time I got there. I didn't get there till 2013. The pulp mill was gone. Yeah, I think before that. I'm pretty sure before that. Yeah.
Yeah, this was the early 70s, and my mom ended up in the hospital and going to school up there for quite a bit, kind of a weird combination. So we'd go up, every about once a month, and I just remember that smell would hit you before you ever saw Missoula.
Yeah. Well, there's the remnants of that mill where the Blackfoot comes down and hits the Clark Fork right before it flowing west. The Clark Fork flows right through the middle of Missoula, and there's a mill that's but it's closed now too. That's up near a little town called Bonner. Up around when you start up the Blackfoot, and it completely ruined that mill and the logging industry. Completely ruined the Clark Fork River, much of the Blackfoot River, but they've brought it back, and now it's a beautiful river. It's good fishing. And the Clark Fork Coalition, which is an outfit out of Missoula, has done a great job just monitoring the Clark Fork River and keeping it clean and bringing it back. And the Blackfoot, I don't know if you've ever read a book called A River Runs Through It by Norman McLean. Great.
Did I read the book? I think I caught the movie.
Yeah, the movie's real pretty, but the book's much better. It's one of the most perfectly written stories I've ever read. McLean was teaching in Chicago at the University of Chicago, and he used to tell these stories, and his kids finally said, "Dad, just shut up and write these stories down."
I got to tell you something. If I were to write something down right now and share it with the audience, it would be the following: that the man to your right, Mark Kelly, is a wonderful storyteller. He respects the craft very much. One of the most intelligent people I know. And we're going to have Kelly White appear with Mark and I as we continue down this virtual journey. Mark and I. Kelly's going to be a part of this as well. Kelly, I'm going to see you very soon. Thank you again for joining us tonight. I'll bring you right back.
All right, absolutely.
Kelly J. White, great individual. I want to bring in Giselle. She's a storyteller. If she has any questions, guys, if you have questions or if you'd want to ask Mark anything, feel free. Again, the book is Timmy, available now on Amazon.com, other platforms as well. We'll educate you more. Not just about the book, but about this craft of storytelling that means a lot to us as the weeks go by. Giselle, this is Mark, and Mark, this is Giselle.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Giselle. How are you?
I am doing well, thank you.
Good. Your name is right behind you.
It is because I host Paper Knife here on the new network with Avi, and that is a show all about stage combat and storytelling and theater, and then we'll get into literature and poetry as well. So that's where my focus is. I'm a fight director, and I am this week starting rehearsals and workshops with Children's Shakespeare Theater up here in Palisades for their high school. Yeah, their high school group is doing Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, okay, good. And are you directing it, or are you?
I'm the fight director.
Oh, cool.
So I'll be choreographing the fights and teaching them the techniques to perform and do sword work safely on stage.
Yeah, great fights in that. I did that play in Riverside Park with Kate Burton, Richard Burton's daughter.
Oh,
and,
how fun!
And we got to build our own fights. We didn't really have a fight director, but I'd done enough, and the other people. And there were some great fights. It's fun to kill Tybalt as
I am looking forward to killing Tybalt, and I'm very excited because they did not cut the Paris fight. Paris appears at the end. So. Yes, it's gonna be short.
Tybalt is such a flashy guy, but he likes to flaunt. He likes to flaunt. Yes, sir. And Giselle again has a show called Paper Knife. She is going to be with us as well, Mark, and talking about the great craft. She has been so involved with all things stage combat, and as an educator of this amazing craft, she's dedicated her life, moved to New York, made it a go, and made it really successful. So again, Giselle, I'm going to put you backstage momentarily, and I want to bring in some of our other storytellers, guys, because Mark's going to depart in a moment. Any questions you might have for Mark? Pete, I'm going to bring you in a moment. Megan, I'm going to bring you in a moment. Howard, why don't you pop in? You and I shared the stage 20 years ago. That's why you're here now. You played a great Mercutio 23 years ago. He was an amazing Mercutio. He inspired me to take up storytelling many moons ago. So, Howard, this is Mark, and Mark, this is Howard.
Hey, Mark.
Howard,
still looks like he's 20-something years old, but I guarantee you he's not.
Wait, Howard looks like he's how old?
He said
20s. I'd say 27 or 28 or so. You could pass for that.
He looks like a kid.
A lot older.
I'll take it.
You must drink a lot of tequila. People say, "Oh, you don't look your age." I say it's tequila.
It's a tequila. Well, I used to. Thank God I'm sober now. But no, meditation and running, and I think just staying creatively active definitely always helps.
Yeah, let it all flow through you, and you'll stay. The body doesn't betray you quite as quickly.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for just being so forthcoming and so vulnerable with us and sharing your life and thank you.
That's right. Thank you. Avi kind of dragged me out of my hole in the ground where I tend to hibernate most of the time.
Well, one of my questions is, was there ever a moment on as you were performing where you kind of made an epiphany, a discovery that kind of made you relook at or reassess how you storytell, like something that really made you kind of question the core maybe of some belief, perhaps? And I mentioned that because Avi, he teaches his great workshop, and the Mirror method, and I'm sure he'll get into it at some point. And I had my own set of I had my own Stanislavski, all objectives, all that, but his work really made me kind of put that aside and start looking at the craft a little differently. So I always wonder if there was maybe a moment for you where that occurred, or
that's a really interesting question, because I don't know that there was a specific moment. I got into acting. I started acting in college because it was fun in the late 60s. And I continued doing it after they paid me for it. And I did a season of rep at Milwaukee Rep, and then I went to New York. I only wanted to do stage work because I loved the literature of the stage. It's Shakespeare, Ibsen, Chekhov, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller. There's just, to my mind, there's more depth, more substance, more richness, more of a greater sense of humanity in some of the great plays that have been written than there are in the movies I've seen. So I said no to movies for a long, long time, and television for 5 years after I got to New York. And when I finally did, even then, I did it mostly because it was really just fun to do. And there were continuing moments of epiphany, of discovery, of self-discovery, because I evolved for myself the notion that what acting was about, the reason to do it, was to discover more and more of myself, of who I am and what I am and what I'm capable of being. So it was a constant. But when I wrote this book, Timmy, actually, first in 1999, I had enough of the show business, of acting and all of that. It had become more of a business for me, and it was not interesting as a business. And I had a son that I could put all my energy and my time and my creative juices into, and I could learn from him by watching him and listening to him and being with him. And it was easy for me to say, I don't do this work anymore. After he grew, and after I'd started discovering, as I said earlier with Avi, what my family meant to me, and what a wealth of emotional connections and thoughts and philosophy that I had within me because of what my family had, as I said, also had given me and what had not given me. I think I became, and when I started writing that down, I gave more value. I discovered more value in storytelling, in how to tell a story. I really mostly had a lot of fun when I was acting. And as long as it was fun for me and fun for the person opposite me, it was okay. I produced a film. I tried to do some other stuff. I directed a little bit, but I'm not a very good director because I get too involved in what the character is doing, and I start doing it for the actor, and I get in his way. And producing just exhausted me. I produced one movie called Chilly Scenes of Winter that's I'm very proud of, and I did it with Amy Robinson and Griffin Dunn were my partners, and I had a great 2 years. It only took 2 years really from the time we discovered the book by Ann Beatty and made it into a movie and got it out, and it disappeared very quickly, but it was on some Los Angeles critics 10 best of the 70s list. It was called Head Over Heels at the time. We got it back and changed it to Chilly Scenes of Winter, the rightful title. But anyway, I did that, and that was a different kind of storytelling, being a producer and sort of trying to put the right people together and then stand back and just let that chemistry grow and not trying to control it all. When I wrote this book, where is it? There it is. When I started writing that, it was a whole different thing because I was able to control every aspect of it.
Sure.
And that was a little frightening and daunting to accept that responsibility of the control of the story. When you act in movies and television, you really have to sort of give up any notion of the art of it, because the director's going to use one take and not another take. The editor's going to, so many other people come in and mess around with it.
Yeah.
It's not your, on stage, a friend of mine once said, a very good director once said to me that the difference between acting in the theater and acting for movies and television was that in the theater, you can be shot.
Right.
In other words, you can die. But the audience can die too. They can shot.
Die right there with you. Exactly.
Oh yeah, they're in the same room. I can smell them. I can taste them. I can hear them breathing. Yeah, they can hear me.
That's a great way to kind of putting that together.
Yeah, Howard, it was a revelation to me that was how life and death acting on the stage was. That's why comedians say, "I died" or "I killed," because there's the soul experiences that vulnerability, that openness. And the movies and television got boring after a while, pretty quickly.
I can only imagine that it's so even writing in the studio system is not what people think it is, because you're writing other people's vision, if you want to call it that. Some people don't have a vision beyond how much profit they can make. Howard, I'm going to bring you right back again next time we have Mark on here. So thank you for that lovely question. We appreciate you. Guys, I want to bring in Pete and then Megan, and then guys, we're going to bid Mark adieu. But again, Timmy, as you guys know, I'm going to talk about this book on other shows. We have a Friday show coming up. Mark won't be with us on Friday, but I'm going to keep talking about the book. And of course, Saturday night, We have another. Mark, how do you feel about the TKN Celebrity Tournament? Now that you're in round number 3, as I said, Michael Cooper is already a big fan of yours as a person. He was already a fan of you as an artist.
Well, I as I said when we did it, I've always loved Michael Cooper. He's just a beautiful physical presence, and meeting him and being able to work with him in that show, I realize he's got a great deal of beauty as a human being too, as does Ray. Doing this thing has been a revelation to me because I tend to stick to myself most of the time.
Sure.
A little bit reclusive. So, but being out and being in something that's show business, and the way you do it, I mean, it's like so much show business. It's like wrestling. I mean, the sounds coming out of you and the whole salesmanship of it is like a professional wrestling. And there's wrestlers there. There's Ray Lloyd,
sure,
and, Jesse Ventura the time before.
That's right.
And the experience has been great for me. It's growing on me, and I find myself taking it not more seriously because it's fun.
Sure.
But I didn't take it very seriously at all when I started it, but it grew on me. And now I'm looking forward to the 3rd round because I'm going to kick some ass.
Yes, sir. Yes, I love it.
I'm not a competitive person, but I'm going to.
I love it.
I want it. I want it all now.
Great to want things, absolutely, especially when they're pure. And I'm going to bring in Mr. Pete, who likes to fancy himself as Peaceful Pete. Pete, any question you'd like to ask Mr. Mark Metcalf?
Mr. Metcalf, how are you doing tonight?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for asking.
I got to say thank you for being on the Black Box, and congratulations on making it to round number 3.
Thank you.
You're amongst the elite, and I got to say that I am in round number 3.
You are?
If you haven't had that little conversation with Avi or not, but sometimes he might throw it in there sometime. But
okay.
But I got to say, I can listen to your stories all day. You've got very like great stories. I mean, I hear you talking to Howard, Giselle, Avi. That's awesome. And and the way that you just open up about family life, it really resonated. Talking about mental health is not easy. It's not an easy topic to talk about.
No, it's not, especially when it's in your family and when it's when you feel it hovering around you all the time, mental health or mental illness. No, it's not easy to talk about, but it needs it because of that. It needs to be talked about, I think. Otherwise, we just tap it down, and it builds up, and it comes out in very dramatic, very sometimes violent ways. So I try to allow myself to be as fluid as I can with my feelings and what I think, and just sort of let it flow through me, not be a vessel to hold on to it, to those kinds of feelings, because they're better out there than they are in here chewing away.
Absolutely. But as a male, do you feel that having somebody with mental illness who's a male, do you think it's harder for them to express it to others?
Yeah, I think the generation I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, certainly the men that we held as icons, Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, people like that, actors like that, the stoicism, and I saw it in my father more than even, and I took more from my father than the kind of stoicism of not being shaken, of being the one that gets things done, that takes care of business, rather than being the one that says, "Oh my," that weeps. We're not trained. I'm not, as a white American, middle class, Middle Western American. I with no particular religion other than a background of Christianity and Calvinism. I had no examples of how to mourn or how to grieve. And we all experience a lot of losses in our lives. I don't know if your parents are still around, or not, but eventually our parents die. My parents both died within 3 years of each other, and my brother died. A lot of loss. I had no idea how to sort of say what this loss means to me. And I had to learn, and the process of writing taught me something about what it means to me, what it made of me, how it changed me.
It's very interesting that you say that, because I grew up, my father was a Vietnam vet, and I grew up, in the 80s, where as a boy, you were taught not to have feelings. You had to keep it all within, because only girls cried and fussed. And that's how, and I know Avi can probably, I knew his dad, so he was probably the same way. We grew up, we had to be tough.
Yeah.
Your father, Pete, was absolutely a no-nonsense man, a very honest man, a very decent man. And I say this to Mark, I don't say the following as something that I'd like to ever remember or reflect upon, because it's not really something positive to think about, but it is a fact. Pete's father passed away in the same hospital my father did. So
I'm sorry for your loss.
Same hospital. And again, Pete, I'm going to have you on here many a times, my friend, to have these great conversations. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about your father and his experience in Vietnam, and whether he ever shared any of that with you.
He actually did not like talking about Vietnam too much. He did bring up stories about having a spider monkey, and so I never believed it. But when he passed, I found my mom had a bunch of slides that she never told us about, my brothers. So I actually have them. So I told Avi, maybe one day we can show him on screen, because he did have a spider monkey. He wasn't lying about it.
No.
Oh yeah, when he was in the bush. No kidding.
Guys, and again, Pete, as I put you backstage, Jamie, I got your question for Mark, and also Eric. Next time Mark is on, I promise you, I will ask those questions. There are great questions there in the comment section. Thank you guys for driving this ship in the comment section. Pete, I'll put you backstage and bring you back in momentarily, my friend.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
And Phil, I'll bring you in next time to have a conversation as Miranda as well. I want to close out with Megan. Any question you have for Mark, Megan, or any statement you'd like to make? She's an amazing storyteller, someone who has dedicated her life to this craft as well, her whole life. So Megan, this is Mark, and Mark, this is Megan.
Hello there.
Hi, Megan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Yeah, I feel like exactly. Yeah, I feel like it's been an absolute delight to listen to all of the stories and anecdotes and honestly wisdom that you've had to share so far tonight. You actually answered like 2 questions I had in my mind already.
Oh, good.
I was going to, as a storyteller, be like, oh, let's talk about something storyteller related. But as someone who also has been touched by mental health, mental illness, and I work part-time in the field, working at a special needs school. I want to ask a question that's a little more broadly philosophical.
Sure.
And that would be, what mantra or saying or belief, whatever you want to call it, if you could think of 1 or 2 sentences, what would you tell a young person, a young adult in today's world, if they woke up in the morning and just felt, I can't do this anymore? What's something that we can tell ourselves when we wake up in the morning to just keep on going and see what the next day brings us?
What I used to tell my son, who was diagnosed as neurodiverse when he was about in 8th grade, is when it gets bad for you, when it gets so painful, when the voices are is write a song about it. I think it's what we're really here for, is to tell stories and pass our experiences on. I keep talking about it going through me. Experience I have passes through me if I make it into a story. I make it into it. Write a song about it is just a metaphor for turn it into beauty. No, there's nothing neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so, as Shakespeare says. Absolutely. And so if it feels horrifying, and I know that it can, and I know that it does, it has for me, and I've been with people where I know it's not as easy to just sort of say, oh, well, I'm going to make a good thing out of this. But at some point, if you can take a deep breath and just begin to sing about it or dance about it, just moving your body, let it pass through you, let it become part of, and when you develop skills with language and when you develop skills of a good storyteller as yourself, anything that hurts can become a story, can become something that illuminates life and an experience for someone else. So, I mean, if somebody wakes up in the morning and just wants to end it all, you just got to crawl in bed with them and hold on to them for a while.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, sometimes that's all you can do is be there, be a witness to their pain. And sometimes that's tough.
I agree. And I think that's a beautiful answer. The fact that we are storytellers, no matter what the medium is, whether actors or singing, but like you said, passing it through ourselves instead of holding on to it. Also, I think so many times these feelings are so isolating. You know, a million people might be depressed, but each one of those people think I'm the only one feeling this. No one else can understand.
But that's really important. Yeah. There's so many other people. And it was a change in life for my son to find out that there was a name for how he felt. They called it, at the time, they called it Asperger's. But and just when he discovered that there was a thing called Asperger's, and he watched a movie about it, I was watching a movie about it, and he watched it, and he said, that's what I've got. And as soon as he knew that, it was like it freed him. It opened him up to know that there were other people that had it, that it was a thing. It wasn't just him.
Right.
It wasn't just his brain that couldn't figure out what somebody else was thinking or feeling. Excuse me. It's very important.
Absolutely.
And what you asked, Megan, is very important too. Your story and your journey is important in the present, not just in the past. Although there's a lot of similarities that we have, and I don't just say Megan and myself, all of us have, and Megan kind of touched upon that. Sometimes we isolate ourselves in the story of us. We think that our story is the only one that's selling on the shelf somewhere in some bookstore, when there's other books with other stories in them that can inspire us and maybe can also be that proverbial human being to hold on to when we feel like there's nobody there. Such great literature has actually saved my life many a times.
Absolutely.
There's great healing in good literature, really, and in good performance too. And something you brought up earlier, Avi, about how when you're damaged, you make a better storyteller. And I think there's something sacrificial almost about, well, comedians. I think Lewis Black is a good friend of mine, and I always think Lewis goes on stage and basically says what other people can't say or don't know how to say, the anger, the rage, the pain that anger comes out of. And in some way he sacrifices himself and thereby assuages some of that anger and that rage and that happens, that other people feel, but they don't know what to do with.
Yeah. Transmutation of the soul.
Guys, please, if you can, Kelly, I'm going to bring everybody back up here to just bid Mark adieu because he's given us his time here, and we appreciate that. Kelly J. White, Giselle, let's bring you all in here. Howard, I think you're back there as well. Let's bring in Phil. Haven't met Mark yet. Phil, this is Mark. Mark, this is Phil.
Where's Phil? How are you, Phil?
as well. Hello.
Nice to personally meet you.
Mark, all the people that are backstage in the black box, huh?
We are, and I think I've came up with a new title, or a title, not new, for the show that Mark and I might present to all of you. If Mark is okay with it, we might call it The Community, because this is a great community that we have over here.
Nice. Yeah. I like that. And I like the whole concept of community.
Me too, my friend. Absolutely. Guys, please wish Mark a great night. I will as well. Mark, thank you for spending your evening with us, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. Thank all of you for your story, which is in your face as well as in your art.
Yes.
Thank you, my friend. I will talk to you soon.